Good evening. On behalf of the Kingston City School District Board of Education, I'd like to welcome you to the Miller Middle School. My name is Dr. Paul Paolino. I'm the superintendent of schools here at Kingston City School District. The Kingston City School District is pleased to be able to host this event sponsored by the Ulster County Chamber of Commerce. Tonight here at Miller Middle School, the debate between Congressman Chris Gibson and Mr. Sean Eldridge is not only an opportunity for our community to hear from each of the candidates, but it's also an opportunity for the Kingston City School District, serving as your host, to present our students and our community a real-life civic lesson. I welcome both of our candidates to our school district, and I wish them both the best of luck. And now I'd like to introduce the President of the Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Ward.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks, Dr. Paolino. Welcome to tonight's 19th District Congressional Debate. Please give a warm welcome to our candidates, Chris Gibson and Sean Eldridge. President standing for the personal flag. Please stand. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. As Dr. Paolino mentions tonight's the round of the Ulster County Chamber of Commerce. It is the second in our series this fall of Meet the Candidates opportunities. Last month we had a sellout crowd for our New York State Senate candidates, Meet the Candidates breakfast, and in October later this month we're featuring the candidates for the New York State Assembly. We are blessed, some would say, that we have 4 representatives in the New York State Assembly representing a portion of Ulster County. October 21st is the date for that, and we invite you to join us to meet the candidates for New York State Assembly. I also want to thank our co-hosts tonight from the League of Women Voters, who I couldn't do this without, our good friends Cindy Bell and Derek Thompson. We could please stand and recognize. Also present tonight to ask questions of the candidates are Ariel Zangla of the Daily Freeman and James Danby from the Times Herald Record. We're going to do obligatory rules, and I'll begin with these and do them as quickly as possible. First of all, we ask everyone to please be quiet and respectful while the candidates are answering questions. In order to not lose precious time, please hold all your applause till the conclusion of our event tonight. You may have seen the signs coming in. There will be no recording of the event, audio or video, with the exception of authorized members of the media. No political signs inside the room. Each candidate will begin by delivering a 1-minute opening statement. Earlier, we determined who was going to go first based on a coin flip backstage, and Mr. Eldridge won that flip and will go first. After the opening statements, we'll focus on questions from the audience and from our panel of reporters. Candidates will have 3 minutes to answer a question and 1 minute rebuttal time. All questions are to be addressed to both candidates. Questions have been and are continuing to be submitted to the League of Women Voters on index cards. They'll be collected and given to me to read. They should not include statements, personal remarks. Please write legibly. If the question is too lengthy, we will paraphrase for clarity. Candidate speaking time will be strictly enforced out of respect for the other candidate and for our 1-hour time limit tonight. A final reminder, as soon as this debate is concluded, please then be sure to turn your cell phones back on. So your phone doesn't fall over after you leave here. So again, be sure that you turn your phones back on. It's my pleasure to tell you something briefly about the 2 men seated in front of you. Chris Gibson grew up in a working class family in Columbia County and went to the same public school that his 3 children now attend. At 17, he enlisted in the National Guard and then earned an ROTC commission at Siena College. While in the Army, he earned a PhD in government from Cornell. Over the course of his 24-year Army career, he rose to the rank of colonel and was deployed 7 times, including 4 combat tours to Iraq. He also taught cadets at West Point, and his military decorations include the Purple Heart and 4 Bronze Stars. After retiring from the Army 4 years ago, he and his wife, Mary Jo, and their 3 children returned home to kindergarten. In Congress, he serves on the Armed Service and Agriculture Committees and is a member of the bipartisan problem solvers group No Labels. Sean Eldridge was raised in a small town in Ohio, grew up in a middle-class family, and attended public schools. His dad was the first person in his family to graduate from high school. Sean has worked to make life better for families in our region. He runs a company that invests in local small businesses and helps them create jobs. He served on the board of Planned Parenthood in Hudson Valley and has fought for women's right to choose and has also been an advocate for environmental protection in our region. Today, Sean is running for Congress to break the bipartisan gridlock and reduce the influence of corporate money in Washington. We will now begin with an opening statement from Mr. Eldridge.
Well, thank you, Ward. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting us. And, it's a pleasure to be a member of the Chamber. Thanks to all of you for coming out and being here this evening. Thank you, Congressman Gibson, for being here as well. When I was growing up in a small town in Ohio, my dad was a Republican and my mom was a Democrat. My parents did not agree on every issue. We had a lot of spirited conversations about politics at our dinner table. But they both taught me from a very young age the importance of being involved in your community, of speaking up and speaking out, and giving a voice to those who may not have a voice on their own. And that's how I've tried to live my life so far. And right now, what I'm seeing is that the voices of families in our region and voters throughout the country are being drowned out by the corporate money, the special interest money in the halls of Congress, in our campaigns, and we need to fix that. I'm running to help fix that. I want to bring some new blood, some new energy, some new ideas to Washington, which I think is badly needed right now. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ward, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sean. In a challenging time, I'm bringing people together to get things done for us, and I've got a record to show for it. Second most independent Republican, according to the Washington Post, and tied for second most effective legislator, according to Open Congress. Results like the Farm Bill, helping family farms, and advancing the local economy, and a federal budget with good investments for us in infrastructure, tourism, and broadband. We passed an amendment to lower our electricity costs and sweeping reform of the VA to help our veterans. And I authored and passed a Lyme bill, first ever, to help our chronic Lyme sufferers. I followed through on my pledge to move the office to Kingston, to fight for everyone, and to help local projects like the Irish Cultural Center. I'm from here. I understand this district. Roots, experience, and results. My opponent is going to make a lot of false accusations, but he's not credible. It's a big election here. Stick with the home team.
Questions, however, we'll ask you again to hold the applause till we're done with our questions tonight. Our first question will come from Ariel Zengler from the Freeman. We'll start the responses with Mr. Gibson. Ariel.
Good evening. My first question, gentlemen, involves the 19th Congressional District. It's a very large and diverse geographical area, but we're here in Ulster County tonight. So what issues do you believe are most important to voters here in Ulster County, and how specifically would you work to help address those issues?
Well, thank you very much. And let me just begin by saying that, after the election last time, like I said, we followed through, we put our office here in Kingston, and we went to work, listening, going to small business owners, listening to the small business owners and their employees, and hearing from folks firsthand, the issues that are important to them. And clearly, the number one issue was jobs and wages, rising wages. And beyond that, we had concerns in terms of changing weather patterns, particularly as it impacted us with storms, Hurricanes Irene, Lee, and Sandy. And so folks wanted to see that addressed as well. And you take a look at whether it be jobs or watershed, these are issues that I brought leadership to the fore. With regard to jobs, I'm proud to have the endorsement of the pro-business groups, that's the NFIB and the Chamber and the Association of Manufacturers. But at the same time, I've got the support of workers, the building construction trades, and the teachers, and even the Environmental Defense Fund. And you don't see that every day, and it's because of our ability to listen and bring people together. I am proud of being a leader on No Labels, because look, this is what people want most of all. They want results. I think one thing we can all agree, if you self-selected to come here, and thank you, by the way, You're not happy with the status quo, and neither am I. I'm fighting every day to make a difference, and we are making a difference. On job creation, what I heard is this. There are a series of things that impact small business. I was with Todd Tessman, a small business owner here in this district, and he talked about the tax code that's complex and unfair. And I voted to streamline. I voted for 20% tax cut for our small businesses to help them have access to more bottom line for capital, so that would be a private sector stimulus, and to expand and hire new workers. And at the same time, I fought to streamline regulations. And then beyond that, helping with energy. This is something that impacts everyone here. I led a bipartisan effort with Sean Patrick Maloney. We're rolling back what FERC did to us. That was an arbitrary energy hike, and that's unacceptable. That's very much on the minds of folks after last winter, after everything we went through, they're paid too much for energy. And so that's an important win for us. Sean and I are working together on that. And we're doing other things. The New York Times reported that gas prices are down over 20 cents in the last several months, in part because of the policies that we're supporting here. And that's very important to working class families. Healthcare. Look, this is one we're going to talk about here, but I'm fighting hard to try to expand our access to quality care at lower costs, and we have to talk about that. And then smart investments like the Farm Bill and like the infrastructure bill and the jobs training bill. We enacted these things. They're very important to our area. The watershed, we fought really hard to get respect from New York City. We're not everywhere where we need to be, but we're getting more investments. We've got them interested in, and I think these are very important issues for our area, because we want to see jobs grow, and we want to see wages rising, and we want to see our quality of life continuing to flourish.
Mr. Owen.
Well, certainly the number one issue I hear about is how are we going to create good jobs, how are we going to grow our economy? And that's exactly what I've been working on over the last few years. I was proud to found a company called Hudson River Ventures, based right here in Kingston, where we've partnered with small businesses throughout our region to help them grow and create jobs. Great companies like Bread Alone right here in Ulster County, the Hudson Valley Seed Library, Augusta Luscious down in New Paltz, wonderful companies who are working hard, who needed support and help to grow and get to that next level. So that's what I've been working on. And unfortunately, while I've been doing that, we've been living with the least productive Congress in the history of our country. Look, I don't believe that government is going to be everything to everyone. It's not. But we are falling down on the very basics. Think about our infrastructure. 60% of our roads in New York State need to be rebuilt. So many of our bridges. We could create many jobs and help grow our economy by investing in our infrastructure. I'd like to see us create a national infrastructure bank to leverage private and public funds to make that happen. I think of high-tech infrastructure. High-speed internet and broadband is so important. In 2014, thousands of our families do not have access to high-speed internet. And that means we're going to fall behind. We can't let that happen. I think we need to fight to make sure we have universal access to high-speed internet. And you think about what the federal government has done in the past. Rural electrification, the telephone. The federal government said, we are going to create universal access to these critical programs. We need to do that with high-speed internet. We can't continue to kick the can down the road. So we have some important differences on how to approach jobs. My opponent has voted for something which is known as the territorial tax system, which is a permanent tax break, a permanent tax holiday for big corporations that want to send jobs overseas. And it's unfortunate that I think that there's a link between the campaign contributions he's received and the support he's given to that bill. You look at companies like GE, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, they would make billions of dollars from this bill, which would send 800,000 jobs overseas. Our congressman is from here, he grew up here, he knows that families are struggling. We need to create good jobs. We need to make sure we don't have more outsourcing in upstate New York. I would never vote for a territorial tax system like that. We got to reform our tax code to provide tax relief to middle-class families and small businesses right here. There are major corporations paying $0 a year in federal taxes, while our families are getting killed with taxes. We can fix that. If we stand up to those big corporations and close those loopholes, we can lower tax rates here, we can create jobs, we can invest in our infrastructure. Let's move our country forward. We cannot continue to live with the least productive Congress in the history of our country.
Mr. Gibson.
Well, first of all, let me just say, we're going to have tonight there's going to be a trend of just lack of credibility. The first thing is with regard to his jobs plan he put out, he may be the first candidate ever to actually put a plan out and say he would vote against it. And that's a real problem. When he says he'd vote against the Farm Bill, that's where a lot of these projects actually exist. And the tax code, listen, I mean, what he described as the jobs leaving this country, he's confused. That's the tax code we got right now. I'm actually supporting a tax code that's gonna make a difference. And you know, my opponent's actually part owner of GE and a lot of these companies that are moving. And you should actually go to a shareholder meeting and make a difference on this.
Oh,
And
this
quite
is Freeman.
frankly, you know, all the bipartisan bills we've actually voted for and got enacted, he doesn't support. So he would be part of the problem. I'm working with local leaders like Mayor Gallo and working on good bills that help us lower taxes, streamline regulations, smart investments, and help with his BEAT initiative here in Kingston. And thank you very much.
Let's talk about the Farm Bill. You know, I've been working hands-on with our farmers at Hudson River Ventures. We've been working to provide access to land and credit for our farmers. And we've got to make the Farm Bill work for families in our region. But what Congressman Gibson is referring to is the fact that I wouldn't support the $8.7 billion cuts to nutritional programs in the Farm Bill. Senator Jordan sits on the committee. She supports our farmers. She works with them every single day. And she said, you know what, we can do better than that. We can make a farm bill that supports our farmers, but doesn't balance the budget on the backs of kids who go to school hungry in the morning. Programs that are very free and that so it is an important difference between us. Because look, I've been very fortunate in my life, but I want to make sure that working families get their fair share. We can raise taxes on people like me and not cut $8.7 billion from food programs that our kids rely on.
Mr. Aldridge, what do you propose we do to rein in the $18 trillion national debt?
Well, it's a big problem. And look, none of us want to leave our kids or our grandkids a debt that we can't handle or a climate that we can't live with. So we need to take it on. I think the number one thing we should have is tax reform. You know, as I said earlier, we've got to fix the inequity of how we collect taxes. Because in New York State, we have very high taxes, but yet we have a federal tax code that's full of loopholes. We give more than $4 billion away every year to big oil companies who don't need that. And this is an important difference between us. You know, my opponent, Congressman Gibson, signed what's known as the Koch brother climate pledge to take no vote, no action that would raise their taxes. Well, I think we should raise the Koch brothers' taxes, and that would help. For some really smart fixes, we can make the programs like Social Security. Right now, if you make $117,000 in this country and $1 million, you pay exactly the same amount in Social Security taxes. I'd say let's raise that cap. Let's make sure we are taxing Social Security in a more fair way. And let's grow our economy. Let's make sure that we are growing our economy, which would also grow revenue. And I think there's ways that we could find savings. Let's crack down on waste. Let's make our military spending more efficient. Let's decrease defense spending. We can do it. We can go to a balanced budget. But let's not do it on the backs of veterans, working families, and partners in our city.
And, you know, let me just say this, that on the day that I was first elected to Congress in November of 2010, you know, the voters sent me there with three basic goals. One, to grow the economy so that every American had a shot at the American dream. Two, to get back to a balanced budget over time so that future generations get the same choices and freedoms that we have. And then three is to protect this exceptional way of life and to focus, and as part of all that, to focus in on our local issues. So where were we? In November of 2010, the unemployment rate was 10%. Look, today, it's not where we want it to be, but at 5.9%, so isn't any question we're better than the day I was elected. And also, in terms of the deficit, the day that I was elected was almost $1.5 trillion. I mean, it's unsustainable and unconscionable. And today, you know, at the end of last month, the deficit came in about $480 billion, still too high, but we have cut the deficit by almost 2/3. And so what I want to say to all the supporters out there is, you know, I've focused on delivery. I've focused on following through on what you sent me to do and doing it in a smart way that brings people together. You know, initially when I joined the No Label, some people were criticizing me and they said, well, why are you doing that? And it's very simple. It's because, you know, our form of government was set up that in the absence of consensus, you keep the status quo. They did it on purpose that way to protect our liberty. Well, if you believe as I do, that the status quo is unacceptable, then by very definition, you're gonna work together. We're a near divided government. We have to work together if we're gonna make a difference. So I'm proud of the work that we've done. And the first thing, to continue to work on this deficit, because we need to get back to a balanced budget over time. And when we get there, we need to stay there. And that, we can do this. We can do this. If you look at coming out of World War II, that debt to GDP ratio was actually tougher than the one we're in right now. And how do we get out of that? Well, there was a lot of pro-growth policies, and there was also some smart choices as far as what we had in terms of programs. We need to continue to do those same very things. I outlined earlier these policies. Unfortunately, my opponent, he talks about this Koch brothers pledge. Well, here's the thing. It's very simple. I don't support energy taxes. I grew up in a working class family. We were crushed by them in the late 1970s. And if you read that, that's what it says. It doesn't say anything about not taking meaningful action on climate change, because clearly I must have, or the Environmental Defense Fund wouldn't have come in for me and supported me. So it's real. It's, once again, no credibility. And the fact of the matter is that my opponent, there isn't a tax he won't support, and yet he talks about pro-growth. That's not, if you listen to small business owners, that's not what they're asking for. We pay the highest tax in the whole nation. We need lower taxes, we need streamlined regulations, we need lower energy costs, lower healthcare costs, and we need smart investments, like the ones that I'm supporting, like the Farm Bill and like the Infrastructure Bill and the Jobs Training Bill. These are very important bills for our area. Thank you.
1 minute for Helen.
I would say this. The only pledge that I will sign is the families in our region and voters in our region to fight for them. I won't sign any pledge other than that. And I think that's the job of a representative. I know we're going to hear a lot about no labels tonight, but Congressman, you picked a label. That label is Republican. You picked a speaker. That speaker is John Boehner. And I don't believe it's moderate to vote to defund Planned Parenthood and get rid of one of the largest healthcare providers. I don't think it's moderate to support fracking, which could put our drinking water at risk. I oppose it. I don't think it's moderate to vote to sue our president when this Congress doesn't have time. I'm all about actual bipartisanship, but I think that record speaks for itself.
1 minute for Helen, Mr. Gibson.
Well, let me just say this, that once again, credibility. I mean, this guy says he's opposed.
Please, ladies and gentlemen, please.
He says he's opposed to fracking, but he makes record profits from fracking, from the drilling, from the financing, from the transporting. Look, I mean, with all the concerns over fracking, Sean, why don't you divest? How come it's okay to make profits? I mean, you're proselytizing about it, but you're profiting from it at the same time. That's hypocritical. And once again, he criticized me for opposing energy taxes. What can we only conclude other than that this guy supports energy taxes? Let me take on this pledge issue. This man said a few days ago that he would be 100% with the movement before he's even read the bill. That is not intended. I mean, there are times when you'll have two different groups that don't agree on an issue. Like, for example, a pipeline. The environmental movement doesn't support it, but you know what? The building and construction trades do. The job of the representative is to listen and to sort through everything. When he says he's going to be with them 100% of the time, he basically shuts the doors to our workers and says, you don't get a choice. That is not independent. And this guy is hypocritical.
And this person comes to the stage only from the time stronger. And Congressman Gibson will answer first.
Thank you. How specifically would you reform the tax code? How would you make that happen? And can you name a specific bill?
Yeah, so it's me first, right, James?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I want you to know, I totally believe we can get this done. In the 1980s, when you had a Republican president and a Democratic Congress, folks didn't think that they could get along. But you know what? They did. They reformed the tax code. This was so important to us that they were able to go through the code, eliminating loopholes that were not helping create jobs, and allowed us to lower rates. And when we lowered rates, we grew. And when we grew, we saw revenues. We saw revenues come from the growth. That's exactly the kind of reform that I support right now. And so when you look at the code, there's some immediately that jump out at us. There are loopholes. just to give you a sense, we spend a little over $3.6 trillion, and we take in, obviously, $482 billion less than that, but we leave out over $1.3 trillion on the table in what's called, by the Joint Committee on tax expenditures, otherwise known as loopholes, 1.3 trillion. So, we can go through that code. There's some immediately that we can identify, like the oil and gas subsidies. Look, I've already voted. My opponent doesn't give me credit for that, but I've already voted to close that. And look, there's also deductions right now for lobbying, and they ought to be closed. There's deductions right now for corporate jets. They ought to be closed. And believe it or not, there's deductions for when somebody gets convicted of a white-collar crime, they can still deduct it. So those are low-hanging fruit that we can immediately close. And then beyond that, there are some deductions in the financial services sector, like carried interest, that should be on the table, that we can talk about this, because ultimately, when we lower rates, this is going to help hardworking families. Why? Because 2/3 of the American people, they don't even itemize. Heck, I didn't even itemize till I was a permanent. Most people don't. And so when you talk about closing closing loopholes and lowering rates, you're talking about a tax cut for 2/3 of the American people. Historically speaking, the middle class spends 96% of their take-home pay. And when they get a tax cut, guess what? They spend historically about 96% of that. So you see where I'm going on this? It's a private sector stimulus. The same for small business owners. Small business owners right now really are in a bad spot because unlike corporations, they can't afford to hire a whole wing of lawyers to go find these loopholes. So they end up filing through their own individualized tax return, and they pay way too high. This is why we've got to do this tax reform, lower these tax rates, and it's going to help grow the economy. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Waldron, please.
Well, this is an issue I hear about every day. As I've been knocking on doors and making phone calls in this campaign, you come across families who are so burdened with taxes in New York State that they're moving. They're moving to North Carolina, they're moving to Florida, and it's sad, it's frustrating. We're a wonderful state. We should make sure we build a tax code here so that people can stay here. And what's frustrating to me is that the way we collect taxes is just not equal. We have such high taxes on middle-class families and small businesses, and yet big corporations have an army of lobbyists and lawyers who've carved up the tax code to make it work for them. So we need to fix that. Right now, we have the highest tax rate, the highest corporate tax rate in the world, 35%. But most corporations aren't actually paying it. Most are paying in the high teens because we have these gaping corporate loopholes. So we absolutely need tax reform. One thing I would include in that is something that's known as the Buffett rule. And the Buffett rule says that if you make more than $1 million a year in this country, you should pay at least 30% as much as middle-class families in taxes. My opponent opposes that. He wants to lower my taxes. I want to raise my taxes because if you've been fortunate, you should be paying back. And this issue is like so many other issues. We can keep talking about tax reform for another year and another year and another year and do nothing. Just as we've done with immigration reform, just as we've done with raising the minimum wage and real investments in our infrastructure. If we keep the same leadership in Congress that we've had for the last 2 years, for the next 2 years, we're not going to get tax reform. We're going to get the same results. The least productive Congress in the history of our country. So if we want tax reform, let's elect new leaders who will get it done. And someone like me who's not accepting a penny of corporate PAC contributions, so I can stand up to big oil and big gas. And let's go one step further than that. Let's build a system. Let's reform our campaign finance system so that everybody can run on their ideas and their values. Until we get rid of Citizens United, until we reform our campaign system, and until we elect folks who are willing to be independent, we're not going to get tax reform. We've got to change who's in Congress if we want to get something done. That's why I'm running.
Let me just be very clear that talking like that, you're not going to attract any bipartisan support. And here's the thing. It's just the reality. And when he was talking about the Warren Buffett rule, I was wondering which one he was talking about. I thought maybe he was talking about the one where Buffett helps move, Burger King to Canada to profit. Is that the Buffett rule we're talking? Because you profited. You and your husband profited off that. How about that? And let me say this, you know, my opponent, he says that he's free of corporate influence. Here's one thing you should know. You know, he takes max donations from CEOs, CFOs, and COOs. Who directs these corporations? He takes money directly from the leaders. It's so disingenuous to say that he doesn't take corporate money. He is corporate. If you think about it, what's the Facebook money? I mean, he started his own super PAC. You know, mostly I have more experience than you, but quite candidly, on super PAC, you got more experience than me. So you I haven't found a single issue yet. I haven't found a single issue you fought where you have any credibility.
One member fellow, Mr. Aldridge.
Well, Congressman, you know as well as I do, and I want to take on this issue of my investments. You know as well as I do that we have investments managed by a third party, much like any mutual fund, any pension fund. And if I'm blessed to be elected, I will put those investments into a blind trust to make sure that there is no conflict of interest. But you know what? The choice is who are we representing? Who are we going to represent in Congress? One person on this stage signed the Koch brother climate pledge, and that wasn't me. One person supports fracking, and that's not me. And one person has not stood up to the big banks and the big oil. I'm going to stand up to them when I'm in Congress.
Mr. Aldridge, will answer first. What specifically would you do in your next term or your first term, starting next year, to create jobs right here in the Hudson Valley region? 3 minutes.
Well, I know we touched on a little bit earlier, but we have a plan. I think the best way to go about growing our economy and creating good jobs is to build on our strengths. We have incredible strengths in our region, whether it's agriculture or advanced manufacturing or education and healthcare and food and beverage. Let's build on those strengths. That's what I've been doing through my work at Hudson River Ventures. And we have a plan up on our website about how we can grow our strengths. So I talked a little bit about investing in infrastructure. I think that's critical. I think we should also invest in job training programs, apprenticeship programs that work, partnering with the labor community. You know, one project I was proud to be involved in right here in Ulster County was founding something that's called the Hudson Valley Advanced Manufacturing Center at SUNY New Paltz, which is a partnership that I helped found with Central Hudson and SUNY New Paltz to bring 3D printing technology to our region, to have our small businesses and our workers be trained on. And if you see that technology, you know it's pretty exciting. We can literally print in layers of plastic and metal now and create objects in 20 minutes that may have taken 2 weeks before. We've got to invest in programs like that to grow our economy, programs like that for the jobs of the future. You know, one other program I throw out there is the issue of computer science. You know, by the end of 2020, the estimate is that there's going to be 1.4 million jobs in computer science in the United States. But we're only going to have trained 400,000 people to do those jobs. And right now in China, to graduate from high school, you have to have a computer science class. But in the United States, only 1 in 10 schools has a class like that. We can't fall behind. Instead of investing in the Common Core and more testing and burdening our teachers with paperwork, let's invest in programs like computer science. Let's build so that's what I think new energy, new leadership can bring to Washington. And there's so many things that we could be doing to grow our economy, like tax reform that we talked about. But if we keep the same leadership for the last 2 years, we're going to get exactly the same results. We need new leadership in Washington if we really want to grow our economy.
Mr. Gibson, 3 minutes.
Thank you. And, you know, as I mentioned, there's a macro piece of this, and then there's a micro piece. The macro piece is working on federal policies to make them more conducive, to change the underlying business environment. And we're talking about reforming the tax code. And I talked about some of the small business owners I've talked to on this and how important this is. I talked about regulation. You know, we all know we need a regulatory state. The question is it optimized? And it's not. You know, I voted to make it more transparent and more accountable, and that's something small business owners are really, really looking for. I feel very frustrated. We take this on from a case perspective in the office to help them. We, small business owners who are either trying to expand their business and having all kinds of fatigue from dealing with the regulation or trying to get a new idea into fruition. And, you know, this is one of the things our office brings. We're very active here with George and Kathy and Dwayne right here. And, you know, I talked about the healthcare and I talked about the energy costs because these 4 are really the impediments to growth to small business owners. We need to address them to make them more conducive to growth. And the 5th is smart investments. And I've talked at some length about some of these. And the jobs training bill, we actually enacted. It's a good bill, bipartisan bill, helped shape it. And, it's gonna empower down here to the county level. For those looking for work, they get help with resume review and interview practicing, and there's money for jobs fair in there to link them up with folks that are looking for work, and it supports the Job Corps. I'm a big supporter of the Job Corps, really, really important to us. And so we've enacted that. I appreciate the president's signature on that. And then I work with local leaders, like Mayor Gallo. I think he's been working real hard and with the council. And look, one of the projects helping with artists, with housing right there in Midtown, and we helped on that piece of it. And also the Greenway, the trails there, which I think are gonna be helpful. Working with the mayor, the Irish Cultural Center. I think that when you look at the ethos of the city and how the leadership has laid this out, there's real promise when you look at the cultural piece of this. All the museums that are there, the rear, the Irish Cultural Center, and I want to be as supportive as I can to this. And in addition to that, and that's why, by the way, I helped get the ambassador here, Ms. Ann Anderson, because we thought that could be helpful to the Hooley and helping with the Irish Cultural Center going forward. And appreciate the Carey family on that. Working with the Roundout Valley growers, crop insurance, more research, these things help the county. And these are things, examples of us working. Let me mention, on his jobs plan, look, he put out a jobs plan, but he's already on record saying he voted against it. That's quite remarkable. And, let me just say this. When he talks about, donations and whatnot, it's just a fact. I'm the second most independent Republican there. It's just a fact. You just have to look it up. So evident, when you look at the wide variable, led us to say what it really matters. I'm very independent on that, and there's no question. And you talk about a third party. Well, a third party doesn't get the profit, Sean. You do.
1 minute rebuttal.
A couple other ideas that I think are important to grow our economy and create jobs, and we have some important differences on them. One thing we got to do is protect our workers, and that's why we need to raise the minimum wage. We can lift millions of hardworking families out of poverty right here in New York State and across the country. Congressman Gibson has said that $10.10 is way too high for families in our region. I disagree with that. We also have to protect our natural resources. One of the reasons I support fracking, in addition to the potential harm it could do to our drinking water, to our environment, is the damage it can do to our economy. You think about the impact it would have on our infrastructure. It would harm tourism. It would harm property values. Instead of investing in short-term jobs that are going to come from Pennsylvania here and then go somewhere else, let's invest in the long-term trade. Fracking would hurt our economy. It would not.
1 minute rebuttal, Mr. Gibson.
Well, look, if you feel that strongly about it, you really should divest because you're making profits off it. And it's just wrong. Everywhere where I went growing up, and particularly in the military, you had to be out front. You really had to lead by example. So it's just, quite candidly, it's just not impressive that you're making this argument and then you don't lead by example. Let me say one thing on the minimum wage. How I feel about it, and I'll address that in a little bit. Let me address first the minimum wage. And that is this. I want our folks to be making a lot more than the minimum wage. And that's why we want to have pro-growth policies. The reason why I think we should compromise on the minimum wage, because $7.25 is too low. It does need to go up. It needs to go up. I think $9 is politically doable, and that's important. It's important to do. It has to be supported.
Please.
It's got to be able to be enacted. You can have any view you want, but that's why I think this candidacy is really not realistic, because you're not going to be able to work with anyone, and you have to be able to compromise. That's just a fact of life. And so, I'm proud to have this. Look, if I was this bad on it, why would the Building Construction Trades Union support me?
Okay, your question, this one goes to Mr. Gibson first. What do you suggest, based on your knowledge of the Middle East, the U.S. should do with regard to the situation regarding ISIS?
Okay. Well, first of all, this is a very serious threat. I have seen this threat up close and personal. Before they were the Islamic State, they were Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and this was the formation that my paratroopers, we fought while we were in Manila province, and they're evil. They do awful things. They executed at point-blank range some Iraqis that were in our area that were doing nothing more than trying to help, to have a better day for Iraq. I was 40 years old, and I grew up Catholic. I could pass a test about evil, but I think it was on that day that I saw evil. I saw the devil on earth when I saw those actions. So, we're going to have to address this. The question is how. How are we going to do that? We need to be smart about the way we do this. Because we have to recognize the source of strength for this enemy. This enemy is going all around the world to try to recruit and fundraise. And so we have to be smart about the way that we defeat that at the same time we're addressing this military threat. Based on my experience, I don't think escalating in Syria was the right move. I oppose this. I voted against it. I think those rebels in Syria, I think that they're militarily incompetent, they're politically not trustworthy, and we haven't set the conditions for any military action. We need a base, a foundation. We need a political base first. And so what I've been advancing is, first of all, we should be helping the Iraqis, helping the Kurdish forces. Some say, well, they ran away in Mosul, but they didn't believe in that prime minister. It was a prime minister that was abusing them and not treating Sunnis well, not respecting the rule of law. And so when the Islamic State came towards Mosul, they took their uniform off and ran. But when those forces got closer to Baghdad, where the Shia forces were able to stop the Islamic State. And now that they've had a new election, they have new leadership, they've shown Maliki the door. Now they're starting to rally and have a sense of nationalism, but they need our support. In return for that support, we expect them to continue to work towards building a sense of cohesion in the country. We can help them with armaments and munitions so that we can defeat the Islamic State right there in Iraq. Now, while we're doing that, we need to be trying to build a political base in Syria. I have argued that we need to work with our friends and allies and pressure. We need to pressure Assad. He needs to go. We can, if we need to give him a buyout, we can do that. But we need the government of Syria to work with some of these rebel forces to get a foundation from which to move forward. And given the fact that this Islamic State has expressed a desire to attack us, even if they don't have that ability right now, we should be securing our borders to make sure that we're safe. So those are the first things.
Mr. Eldridge.
Well, certainly ISIS, I think, poses a very troubling threat to the Middle East. And I agree with Congressman Gibson that what we need here is a political solution. Obviously, we've been engaged militarily in Iraq for many years now. That alone has not worked. And I think we need to make sure we have a credible partner both in Syria and in Iraq to address this, but to address it with the international community. Because what I hear when I'm out campaigning and talking to families throughout our region is that folks are pretty tired of never-ending conflict. We don't want more boots on the ground. We want to make sure that we're working with the international community and not just carrying the burden on our own shoulders. So let's address ISIS. Let's find a political solution. Let's work with the international community to do that. But I think we also need to do some nation building right here at home. We are investing a lot elsewhere, but we have so much to build here, whether it's our infrastructure, whether it's high-speed internet. We can't be everywhere and for everyone in the world. We can certainly protect our borders and secure our borders, and I completely agree with that, but let's make sure we're investing here as well.
Comments, but let me expand then, because there is a fourth point we need to do, and it's longer term, and that's to reassert deterrence. We need to have peace through strength. And what that means is, I believe, we need to think and act differently. For too long, we've tried to be the world's policeman. And quite frankly, our greatest strengths are not militarily, although we need to have the world's strongest military as a deterrent for those who would do harm to us. Our greatest strengths are our ideas, as instantiated in our founding document. As a young country as we are, we have the longest standing stable constitution in the world right now. On our best day, other countries want to be like us. We should be leading with those ideas, diplomacy, commerce, and trade. And then when we do, we can actually reform our national security establishment. We can be safer for less money. By conflating all these combatant commands all over the world, we should have one joint forces command. We should have the principle of strategic maneuver, not forward with all this the world's policeman activities. I believe, and I've written on this, but I think truly we can be safer for less money.
I think more broadly, there's so many other things we need to be working with the international community on with so much more urgency. You think about something like climate change. Almost 400,000 people marched in New York City. Even parts of the Defense Department have said that one of the biggest threats to our national security is climate change, and it's a real threat. So I'd like to see us take that on. Let's work with the international community to get things done. And that's certainly one. And let's make sure that we are sending our values elsewhere in the world. Let's protect women. Let's protect LGBT people. Let's make sure we're leading with our values. I think we can do that, and I think we can do better at doing that.
Okay, next question will be answered first by Mr. Eldridge. Ariel Zangler from the Freeman.
I just want to circle back to the issue of minimum wage. You guys have both spoken about raising the minimum wage, though you disagree on how much it should be raised. So my question is, how would you work to build consensus in the House to raise the minimum wage at all? And when can workers expect to see any increase?
Well, it's an important question, and I certainly support raising it to at least $10.10 to lift millions of hardworking families out of poverty. What's frustrating to me is that the American people and the majority of families in our region agree, but yet we're not seeing action in Congress. So the question is, why not? Where's the miscommunication happening? And I think this comes down to the role of big corporations right now in Washington. You know, Congressman Gibson opposes $10.10, and so do a number of his corporate PAC donors. So does the National Restaurant Association and Walmart, who contributed to his campaign, and then now he votes to block raising the minimum wage. That's a problem. We need to make sure that our elected officials are listening to us. And right now, they're not. They're not listening on the minimum wage. They're not listening when it comes to things like campaign finance reform and dealing with immigration reform. So we've got to make sure that they listen. I think we've got to tell the stories of the hardworking members of our community who are working for minimum wage, who do need a leg up. You know, the number one driver of our economy is consumer spending. So we need a strong middle class. That will help everyone. And I've seen some countries take on this issue in a non-political way. In the United Kingdom right now, for the minimum wage, it's increased every year by a panel of economists. It's gradual, it's predictable, it's not political. I would support something like that. Let's raise the minimum wage. Let's take the politics out of it. Let's make it happen.
Ariel, I think you really asked the opposite question. Because, you know, you can have any view you want. You really can. It's America. You can be all over the map. But at the end of the day, the question is, what can we get done? And look, I mean, I do think that somewhere around $9, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. You know, but we have to work together to do that. And look, I realize that maybe half the people in here won't want to hear this reality, but it is no less true that no analyst thinks that the Democrats are going to take control of the House right now. So you got to be practical. I mean, you just have to be practical. And the fact of the matter is I've got an ability to work on both sides of the aisle, whether it be Sean Patrick Maloney on FERC and Lime, Peter Welch on farming, veterans, Senator Gillibrand and Senator Leahy too on so many of these farmer provisions, and John Garamendi on conservation, and Jared Huffman on conservation and national parks. Look, the record is there. You can take a look. And it comes from the temperament of the way I was raised. You know, my mom and dad told me to listen to everybody and to try to find a way to bring people together. So from the time I was a point guard, and then, I wasn't a high scorer, but my job was to get the ball to the high scorer so that the team could win. And then in the Army, the same thing. You know, y'all may not realize it, but you asked me to do some hard things. You know, go to Iraq, go to Kosovo, go to Haiti, and try to bring people together. Yeah, it was really hard. And, so I've honed these skills, these mediation, negotiation skills, and I think that that's really important. I think what we have to do is get the parties out of where they are right now, because the Democrats don't want to come off 10-10 because they think it'll, fire up their base, and they don't want to look like they're compromising, and Republicans don't want to yield either. But you know what? What does that do for workers? They stick at 725? It hasn't changed since 2007. Let's compromise and move on, and then let's index it. I think we should index it. Let me say this. If I was this bad on this issue, why would the building construction trades unions, and why would the teachers? So, let me say this too, that, this is really, I think, an operative question for this debate, is who has the temperament to bring people together to get things done?
So let's talk about compromise. What has Republican compromise given us? A government shutdown, if Congress voted for. It gave us the least productive Congress in the history of our country. Look, I believe in compromise. And you know what? People who believe in raising the minimum wage need to vote. People who believe in doing something about climate change need to vote. We need to make sure that our voices are heard in the halls of Congress. And if and when we fix our campaign finance system, we will elevate the voices of voters. We will pass an increase in the minimum wage. We can get those things done. But we've got to get this corporate PAC money out of our politics. And because I'm not taking a penny of corporate PAC contributions, I will be independent. We can't get it done. I think if you look at the record of Republican compromise, I think nearly defaulting on our debt and shutting down our government because they didn't agree with him on one issue, the issue of healthcare, that's wrong. That's not compromise I can believe in. I think we've got to be better than
James Nanny is here. The Times Herald Record did a story on this. My voting record was the same as Sean Patrick Maloney. You're going to call him a Tea Party Republican? Look, the fact of the matter is that was very reasonable. And I'll tell you something else too, that, you know, it's very disturbing, is that Mr. Eldridge here said that he would vote against the last bill that was moving in Congress 36 hours before the debt ceiling in 2011. Look, I'm just saying that would be so cataclysmic to our economy. I think that you shouldn't have a voting card, at least at this point in your life, because that would crush you. So I'm just saying that is not representation. He said he would vote against the bill that would have paid our debts in 2011, and that's really the problem. And look, we're going to talk more about this, but again, your comments on campaign finance reform would mean so much more if you're taking corporate money, you're taking it from the CEO, and you know you're hypocritical on the issue, and you're not leading by example, and it doesn't inspire me.
The next question we've talked certainly at length about fracking, but in addition to that, what innovative forms of energy do you favor for our future in this country to make us less dependent on oil? Mr. Gibson.
Well, great. Actually, I'm glad I get a chance to talk about this because, you know, my opponent's been spending about $1 million, I think, on TV ads that distort my position. So let me address this. Look, he ran a TV ad and he said that I support fracking. You know what? He didn't put the rest of the sentence, which is, you know, only if it's safe. And here's the problem. You know, when you commit to science, you have to wait for the studies. I supported the additional studies, the health studies, all the studies. And some of my party were like railing against the governor. And I said, you know what? This is so important. After Agent Orange, when we went through, we didn't think the government was poisoning our servicemen and women and the Vietnamese, but we were. You know, and then in the 70s, GE had a permit, a legal permit to dump into the Hudson River. Now we're cleaning that up. So it makes every sense that we will lead the nation and to make sure that we have the safest protocols. So let's wait for the science. And listen, if a town doesn't support fracking, you know, as somebody who believes in individuals, families, and communities, I have always supported home rule. You don't want to have fracking and you vote to ban it, you should be supported and you'll have a strong ally in me. I want you to know that. This is my point. You know, I put those TV ads and it's not my position. You know, I mean, it's life and I can take it. But I mean, it's disingenuous. And then to make it matter worse, then you're profiting off it. So I feel like, you know, this is quite something. But let me say this, on the issue of energy, we have to have both feet on the ground. You know, think about how everybody got here today. I'm pretty sure most everybody drove a car here. So what we have to do is recognize that. Look, I have been recognized as the #1 Republican in the nation on the environment by the League of Conservation Voters. And, you know, I think that's why the Environmental Defense Fund supported me. And it was one of those moments where I really feel like they got it. You know, because if you look at the ad they ran, they said, look, here's a guy who's trying to bring people together to at once lower energy costs and protect the environment. That's exactly what I'm trying to do here. And so I have voted 59 times to protect the energy efficiency and renewable energy account. And I'm very optimistic. This is a country that can do great things. We're going to perfect the photovoltaics, and we're going to democratize energy. We're going to make solar power available to working class families. And that's going to lower their overhead costs, and it's going to be good for the economy, and it's going to be good for the environment. And in addition to that, I've supported wind power, I've supported geothermal and hydro, and I am pushing, I think we have a very ambitious goal here in New York State, but I think it's possible. And I also think, look, my record is very clear on this, and it's very thoughtful, and it's very balanced. And I lead by example. My wife and I, we give our pension back to the Treasury. We don't have a lot of money, but you know, that's something, Sean, that I do. You know, we do that.
Please, let the candidates be heard.
So,
That's an important.
Please allow the candidates to be heard. We have only around 10 minutes left. Just
I just want to, I want to
please be
address my
quiet.
side for a second. I want to address my side. I'm just asking, please show respect here, all right? We're all going to do this together.
Thank you,
Thank
thank you.
So, this is a district that used to be represented by Congressman Maurice Hinchey. And I was very proud to get to this minute. And Congressman Hinchey was a leader on so many issues. But in particular, he was a leader on the issue of environmental protection. And I think it's pretty frustrating to go from Congressman Hinchey's leadership of 100% of the time fighting for our environment, fighting for renewable energy, to a 33% rating on environmental protection, which means out of every 3 votes on the environment, Congressman Gibson has voted against the environment 2 out of 3 times. I don't think that's something really to be proud of. And I think Congressman Hinchey certainly is a role model for all of us. We've got to keep fighting for the things that he has fought for. And what I heard in there was, let's wait. Let's wait and put this off. Well, that certainly seems to be the mantra of this Congress. Let's wait. Well, I think on climate change, we cannot wait. We have to act today. If we care about our kids and our grandkids, if we don't want to see more flooding in our region, we have to act. We have to act with much greater urgency. And that's something that I hope to bring to the halls of Congress. I was proud to serve on the board of Scenic Hudson. And many of you may know Scenic Hudson is one of the largest environmental groups in our region. And when I was chairing their public policy committee, one of the things we worked on was sea level rise. In Kingston, how are we going to deal with the increased sea level rise and flooding in our region? We need the federal government to be a partner in that. We've got to deal with the mitigation that's going to be required because of climate change. But let's not go from asking if climate change is real to adapting to it. Let's do something in the middle where we try to stop it and slow it down, because I think the stakes are really high. We need renewable energy. There's no question. I think everyone would agree that we are heading toward more renewable energy. We're going to have more and more. So why do it more slowly? Let's do it more quickly. Let's make sure we extend the tax credits for renewable energy that encourage our small businesses and our homeowners to use renewable energy. If we're going to get there anyway, let's get there tomorrow. Let's make our air cleaner and our water cleaner. Let's slow down climate change. Let's lead the world on this. Right now, there are other countries that are making these investments faster than us. I want to lead the charge on environmental protection. I want to lead the charge about dealing something with climate change. I want to continue the kind of leadership we saw from Congressman Hinchey, and I think unfortunately we've headed in a different direction over these last 2 years.
Let me start with this. I guess I'm a little surprised that we didn't meet sooner because, I worked with Scenic Hudson very closely on the farm team, and we gave them a voice. And for somebody who ran that committee, how he didn't come in to see the federal legislator is really beyond me, but I'll leave that for you. There's only been one vote on fracking, and the vote was whether or not we should have federal regulations to protect water and air. And I was one of 2 Republicans to join with the Democrats to say that we should have baseline federal regulations. My party's got to do better, and I'm working on that. I'm a leader in my party too, and we've got to be able to see some of these things. Quite frankly, some of the things that he's saying I believe true. Just as I want to make sure that we don't leave a mountain of debt for future generations, I want to make sure the earth is habitable too. Everything needs to be sustainable. I am the Republican author, co-author, you might say, the Republican lead of the FRAC Act. That was Maurice Hinchey's bill. And Deanna DeGette is the Democrat lead. She's from Colorado, and we brought this thing forward, and so I'm proud of it. The fact that I'm actually picking up some of what Maurice did.
Mr. Weber?
I think a lot of this comes back to this overriding problem, which is that the voices of Americans and families in our region aren't being heard. Folks do want to protect our environment. They do want greater action on climate change. So what's standing in the way? What's standing in the way is big oil companies like ExxonMobil, who are just covering Washington with money and our campaigns with money. ExxonMobil has contributed thousands of dollars to Congressman Gibson, and then he's voted to block closing the loopholes that they rely upon. If we're going to take this on, we've got to stand up to these big oil companies. We've got to deal with this with much